Morning everyone. So I've been sent through a link to a article that's been written on Leupold's website, which is about the 5 optical myths explained, top 5 optical myths explained. And so I thought I'd just read it through with you guys, and as we go along I'll see if I can demonstrate what's actually they're talking about here. To help me do that, I've actually got a couple of Leupold scopes as well. So I've got the Mark 5 7-35, and I've also got the Leupold LRP 8.5-25. So both really good long range scopes. The first myth that they're saying is that a larger main tube lets in more light and makes for a brighter scope. So what they're talking about is the tube diameter. So this is the 35mm tube on the 35 power scope, whereas with the 25 power, the LRP, this is only a 30mm main tube. So you can see there that this main tube is considerably larger. So people think that the bigger the tube, the more light that comes through, and it's simply not the case. So with the 35mm main tube, so this is the 7-35, and as you go up in magnification, you actually lose elevation adjustment as well, which is important. If you want to build a long range scope, you're going to need a lot of elevation adjustment to shoot out far. So to get more elevation adjustment, to be able to screw this erector tube, the erector system, the adjustment system around inside the tube, the bigger the tube, the more adjustment you've got, the further you can shoot. So they say on the surface, this seems like it makes sense. If you had a 2-foot diameter water pipe versus a 1-foot diameter pipe, the 2-foot one is going to let in more water through, but light is a weird thing, and there's more going on inside the rifle scope than you may think. The actual benefit of the larger main tube is more adjustment travel, plain and simple. The erector system, the part inside the scope that controls the magnification and the point of impact, moves around inside the main tube. With long range shots, the bullet drops more the farther you shoot. Adjusting your elevation dial allows you to compensate for this bullet drop. The larger the main tube, the more adjustment you can dial on your elevation, which compensates for the larger drop at further distances. The little known fact is that the erector system that limits how much light you're getting to your eye, it also has a big effect on image quality. So the erector system, which is inside the scope that you can't see, is actually the part that affects the image quality, how much light is coming through. And but you can't actually, how do you quantify that? How do you actually see that? But here's a scenario that you may run across. You have 2 different scopes from 2 different brands with similar specs, both of the same magnification range, main tube diameter and objective lens size, but brand A has 20 MOA less travel than brand B. How is this possible? Well, you can't cheat physics, so instead some companies decrease the diameter of the erector system, thus providing you with more travel. Of course, the downside is this also decreases the amount of light and the quality of the image that's getting to your eye. That's why we didn't skimp on the Mark 5 HD's main tube. We went for a 35mm main tube so we're going to have the right amount of travel while still preserving an incredibly bright and clear image with a larger diameter erector system. So this is this 35mm main tube on this 35 power scope. Even though it's a big main tube, it's actually got 100 MOA of adjustment, which is actually less adjustment than the 25. So the 5-25 model that they do in the VX5 series only has 128 MOA of adjustment, so more adjustment. So this doesn't have as much adjustment. So whether that's as a result of the power or whether the erector system is different, which it probably is, it may end up in a brighter image than the 25 power, though I doubt it. So if we put this in terms of different brands of rifle scopes, for example, Leupold, like in their LRP model, this is a 30mm tube. This is probably something a bit more familiar to most people. So it's a 30mm tube, 25 power scope. Now this is 85 MOA of adjustment in it. The same scope in Swarovski, so we're talking like an 18-25 power, 30mm main tube, all that sort of stuff. It's got like 45 MOA of adjustment in it, which is very unsuitable for long range shooting. However, it's because their erector system is a lot more bulky. There's not as much room in there to move around. And the size of the erector system is why the Swarovski optics get such good light transmission. So they're such a bright optic when you look through them. Far better than a lot of other brands, and it's because the erector system on theirs is larger, so you get a better image quality. The trade-off, you can't shoot as far because you can't adjust. So that's what that means. Okay, so number 2, a larger objective lens means the scope will be brighter. So what they're talking about is the lens that's closest to the objective lens. Okay, so again, this seems like it makes common sense, but the size of the objective lens is directly tied to the magnification range of the scope. Have you ever noticed how lower magnification scopes usually have a small diameter objective lens? So they're talking like a 2-7, for example, would have like a 28 or a 33mm front objective. So low powered scopes have smaller objectives. That's because the combination of these specs is what creates the scope's exit pupil. The exit pupil is the disc of light that actually hits your eye. The disc needs to be the right size in order to have a bright, clear image all the way through the magnification range. You can visualize this by taking an unmounted scope, holding it in your hand with the objective lens facing up, put it on a white piece of paper on the table below and shine a flashlight through the scope. Make sure the scope is the same distance away from the paper as it would be from your eye if you were shooting. Okay, I've got a torch. So if you have a look on the wall here, so we've got about 3.5 inches of eye relief there, and if I shine a light through there, you'll see that there's a larger disc and then there's a little disc in the middle, just a tiny little dot in the middle. That little dot is the exit pupil. It's around about, well, I'll tell you exactly what it is. This is a 56mm front objective and it's on 35 power. So what's that, like 1.5mm? If you divide 56 by 35, you get about a 1.5mm exit pupil, yeah? But if we now crank this scope up all the way, or down, sorry, all the way to 7 power, and we do the same test, so about the same distance away, shine the scope in there, like that, you can see that that disc, the full disc is now much, much larger than what it was before, yeah? So it's, what's 7 into 56, like 8, roughly? 7/8 is 56. So it's about an 8mm dot. So it's a much bigger beam of light that comes through the scope and hits your eye, yeah? Now, if you're shooting during the day, your eyes are the pupil is gonna contract, yeah? And it's only gonna be about 3mm in diameter. So an exit pupil bigger than 3mm, your eye's not going to be large enough pupil to actually absorb all the light. And so the image quality is going to look roughly the same. The difference is when you're shooting at night, on low light conditions, when your pupil dilates, and it dilates out to around about 7mm. So if the exit pupil is smaller than 7mm, you're going to be losing the brightness of the scope. You're going to be losing your the clarity of the image. So there's also a very easy mathematical formula to figure out the size of the exit pupil. It's the diameter of the objective lens divided by the magnification. This will give you the exit pupil diameter in millimeters, and then they give examples. So, but basically, so that exit pupil is what determines how much light is coming out of the scope and therefore how much your eyes have to pick up. But there is trade-offs here. There's trade-offs with everything, yeah? There's no free lunch. So the bigger the exit pupil, the more that scope can move around over your eye and you can still see the full image. Like if the exit pupil is tiny, then there's only a very specific spot where you have to sit your eye that you can see through the scope. And if you move your head at all, you'll lose the image. Big exit pupil, you've got a much bigger area. Now, the good side of that is that if you're wanting quick shots, if you're wanting to throw the rifle up and see the image instantly, then a big exit pupil is really, really good because it's not as critical where your face is on the stock. But the problem is that because you've got a lot more movement, there's a lot more opportunity there for there to be a large amount of parallax error. As you move your face around, if the parallax isn't set correctly, then the image and the image and your crosshair will actually look like they're moving relative to each other. And so error will creep in there. So it's not always a good thing to have a large exit pupil Though generally speaking, if you're looking for a better image quality, then definitely exit pupil is important. Okay, point number 3. You should sight in the scope and never touch the dials again. This myth seems to be stemmed from the more traditional hunting crowd. It was a common practice back in the day to get a scope, mount it, sight it in at 100 yards and never touch the adjustment systems again. While this isn't a horrible thing to do, you'll be able to hit the kill zone on most animals out to 400 yards, it definitely limits what you can do with your scope. Adjustments on Leupold scopes are kind of like a car's engine. They want to run. Actually, the first thing we tell customers to do on a new scope is run the adjustments back and forth for a few cycles to make sure all the grease is evenly spread out. That's not something I've heard before. Certainly if Leupold are saying it, it's something I'll look into introducing when we sell new scopes to make sure that we do that, to make sure that it's spread out. A lot of people are quite worried about adjusting all the way to the limit and breaking something inside, which isn't really likely to happen, but certainly hitting the limit, you know, sort of it gives you a weird feeling. But you know, spreading the grease out, that makes sense. Kind of like the break-in period on a car, but much shorter. We take it a step further with our custom dial system. This system is designed for you to be able to extract distance every time you shoot. Exact distance every time you shoot. So you'll be dialing the elevation adjustment back and forth, depending on the yardage you're shooting on, for as long as you own the scope. Since our adjustments are precisely made and repeatable, you'll have no issues with tracking and returning to zero. Well, certainly when we do long-range shooting, you're sighting in at 100 metres, setting a zero stop, and then we might be shooting out to, you know, 600,000 metres or further, and then adjusting back again. So we're always adjusting these scopes, and they don't lose their zeros or anything like that. You know, they're exceptionally strong and well made. And same with the windage adjustments themselves. So, yeah, you can adjust your scopes around all over the place. You're not going to damage anything. Point number 4, a heavier rifle scope is a sign of durability. No, not necessarily. Another common misconception that seems logical, the heavier something is, the more durable it is, right? Most people think of a huge truck compared to a little compact car, but obviously the truck can take a lot more of a beating. But recoil energy on a rifle is different. It doesn't like travelling through a dense mass. When you pull the trigger on your rifle, the shot creates a lot of kinetic energy. That energy needs to go somewhere. It makes its way through the gun, up into the rings, and eventually into the scope. The lighter scope will actually disperse this kinetic energy more efficiently. Well, a lighter scope will have less kinetic energy in it. Kinetic energy is a function of the weight of the scope itself. Yeah. So the gun is coming back under recoil at a certain velocity. The lighter a scope is, the less energy it will have. So the rifle's coming back under recoil. The scope wants to stay where it is. The weight is resisting the recoil. It wants to go forward, so it'll slide forward. The heavier the scope is, the more it'll want to slide forward and pull out of the rings. And that's why, like, some of the big tactical scopes you'll see nowadays have got big wide rings, so there's more surface area to resist the scope from slipping in the rings. These have got 3 screws holding them down and all that sort of stuff. The other thing though is, if you do have a big heavy scope, you want to make sure that you put like a good base system on it, steel base system, because heavy scopes will actually screw up a alloy Picatinny rail or something like that. Think of a truck hitting a super dense wall. The wall is going to transfer some of that energy back into the truck, but it's also going to internalize a lot of it, which could cause damage. But if the wall was made of heavy duty netting, the truck would receive minimal damage because the netting transfers the energy more efficiently, which prevents damage. It's the same concept with a scope. When a lighter scope receives a wave of energy, it flexes in the rings, dispersing that energy more efficiently. I don't like the word flexing, but yeah. The less mass a rifle scope actually has, the more efficiently it can do the job and longer it's going to last. And certainly Leupold have got a testing facility. In their testing facility, they simulate the recoil of a 375 H&H, and they test their scopes for thousands of rounds to make sure that the internals don't pull at them. Because think also, if the scope's wanting to pull in the rings and can't, then all the internals inside the scope want to pull forward out of the scope as well. So lenses and all that sort of stuff will pull forward. And so, yeah, so the lighter the internals of the scope, the less likely you are to do damage under recoil. And point number 5, I need a lot of magnification to shoot long range. You've probably heard it before, I need at least 25 power to shoot 1,000 yards, or whatever your long range is. But the truth of the matter is that the long shots can be taken with relatively low magnification scopes. Even a semi-proficient shooter can hit a man-sized target at 1,000 yards with a 3 to 9 power rifle scope. We've even seen shooters who can consistently hit 300, 400 meter yard, 300 or 400 yard targets with a 1 power red dot sight. At the end of the day, skill and knowing your equipment can make up for the lack of magnification. And definitely the Leupold RDS that we took out last weekend, we were pretty consistent at 400 meters with that. Now the size of the dot I think is a little bit larger than what they advertise, and it covered our target up, but certainly we were shooting a relatively small target for someone using a red dot. But the elevation component of it was very consistent, so you can do it. And people use open sights all the time for shooting 600, 800 meters. So you don't need to have high powered optics. However, technology's come to the point nowadays that we can rely on high power optics. And if it makes your shooting better, then there's no reason not to do it. When your image is magnified, it actually magnifies everything else as well. Well, yeah, no, not really. It just, you can see what's happening. It doesn't magnify the fact that you're shaking. It's just you can see that you're shaking. So your breathing, involuntary movements, and mirage all have a magnified effect on the image. I'll agree with the mirage. When you knock the power back a little bit, everything can feel much more stable. You may surprise yourself with how accurately you can shoot on lower magnifications. So last weekend we were out shooting and there was a bit of wind and a lot of mirage. And when the mirage was boiling, the target was moving all over the place. It was very, very hard to see the target. When the mirage was more streaming, it was a bit easier to see the target and place your shots better and that sort of stuff. And the spotting scopes that we had dialed them. They were 20 to 60 power, but all of them we had dialed back to 20 power because at 60 power, you just couldn't see anything. So definitely mirage can have a big effect on what you can see, and definitely the higher the magnification, the more pronounced the mirage is. But the other thing is that if you've got like a 25 power or larger, 30, 35 power scope, and you're shooting through mirage, you can't actually see what the mirage is doing. You can just see that the mirage is there and that the image is moving around and that sort of stuff. It's when you dial the scope back, 20 power and less, you can actually see the mirage, but you can see which way the mirage is going. So you can see if it's boiling up or if it's streaming left or right, at what sort of angle. And from that, you can judge what the wind is doing down at the target. So, if you're shooting long range, I certainly agree with them in this respect, in that you don't need anything, 25 power or larger, but definitely it could be an advantage using something 25 power, around 20 to 25 power for long range shooting, just for the ability to call wind. So that's their 5 points, their 5 myths that they've debunked. If you're also interested in more information about optics and that sort of stuff, I've actually done 2 different videos on optical triangles, so relationships between different factors of optics. And I recommend reading that. It's on my blog, on my website. But if you'd like to know more about it, definitely leave a comment down below and I'll see if I can do more videos like this in the future. Make sure you like the video and give us a follow. Thanks.